Okay, so now we've got the sign built, most of the sign, we've got the welcome part built. So what I'm going to do now is use some extrudes and some sweeps to create this big base and the star at the top. So let's jump straight into there. So I'm going to use, I'll use a sweep to create the big blue base. So we'll go to our create menu, go to spline and create a rectangle. Now this rectangle, I want it to be not too wide, but I want it to be fairly tall. And actually I'll leave it at the height it is now. And I'm going to shift it up so that the base of it is just underneath my ground plane. Something kind of like this. Now I'm not doing this particularly accurately. I'm just kind of throwing it all together by eye just to go through some of these processes to see how we would start to think about building these things in 3D. One of the great skills of modeling in 3D is to look at the object that you want to model and try and figure out what are the tools I'm going to use to make this before you actually start. That way you can save time, you've got a good plan of how you're going to build things, and you can hopefully build things pretty quickly. Okay, so looking at the base, this blue base of the sign, it goes from almost halfway through the sign to nearly halfway through. It's almost a quarter the width of this entire sign. So let's have a look at mine and see what I've got here. So let's shift that off to one side. I'm just going to make it maybe a little narrower. That looks pretty good. I'm going to grab the sign group and the welcome group and just move those up so they're sitting up near the top. And let's make this sign have some thickness. So I'm going to make another rectangle and sweep it around that large rectangle. So let's go create spline rectangle, and let's make this rectangle small. Let's start off with 20 by 20, and I'm going to put both of these into a sweep. So let's create generator sweep, and I'm going to select both of these rectangles and drag them and drop them into the sweep. Now what's really important with the sweep is the order that these two shapes sit in the sweep. How this works is that the the small rectangle is the cross section. That's the first object. The large rectangle, that's what that small rectangle is going to be swept around. That is second. If these are around the wrong way in your sweep, you'll get something kind of odd that looks like that. So if you think your shapes are right, you think your sweep is kind of working, but you get an odd shape, first thing to try, swap the order of the shapes inside the sweep. Make sure they're sitting equally under each other and not sitting one as a child of the other. So these two are sitting at the same level underneath the sweep. So that's looking pretty good. Just to make it simple, I'm just going to throw that blue material onto there just for now. And let's move that base backwards. Oops, make sure you've got it selected and move it backwards. And that can sit there. Now it may be a little thick. Maybe I'll go back to that first rectangle and just change the size of that a little. Something kind of like that. Now the great thing about this process and this style of modeling and building with Cinema 4D is with all these hierarchies of tools that go together to make the shapes, all of this can be changed. We can go right back to every single curve that we created, every extrude. We can change any of these things at any time. So what I tend to do when I'm working is I tend to try and build things quite quickly and get all my shapes and my structures in place. Then I go back and start fine-tuning the size and the scale and the detailing of them. So I find it's a really good process, a really good way of working. Build it roughly and then refine it. So we've got the base done, we've got the sign mostly done and the welcome done. So now we want to look at this star that we've got. So there's sort of an 8-pointed or 2 neon stars here and then a base. So I'm going to use an extrude for the base, and I will probably use a sweep for the actual star itself. So let's go to our create menu and create the star. I'm going to go to spline and create a star. There we go. So I'm going to keep working at the origin until I've got this entire thing built. Then I'm going to shift it up where I want it. So with my star, let's just close these other groups. I want 4 points on my star. I'm actually going to make it as 2 separate stars. Now I want to get my sizes right. So the interior radius is pretty small. Let's click and drag this down. And the exterior radius, let's pull this down, something kind of like that. Let's have a look at the picture. I always look at proportions or relative sizes. So this star is just sticking out a little bit either side of the base. So if I look at this from kind of front on, I'm just going to shift this temporarily. That's still pretty big. So let's make that kind of that sort of width. And let's make the inner width now a little smaller. There we go, something kind of like that. We can always change it later. Now this is a neon star in the image, which is, you know, a thin glass tube. So I'm going to create a circle to sweep around the star to give the look of a neon kind of tube. So let's go create spline circle. Obviously this needs to be really small. We need to be really small, something like around 0.5 centimeter for mine. Yours may be different. That's probably a little too small, maybe 1 centimeter. Okay, so let's create a sweep and sweep that star. So create generator sweep. Let's drag and drop both of these shapes into the sweep. And now we've got this neon shape. And again, if your sweep doesn't work, just check the order of your curves. If you've got something that looks like that, you need to swap these around. So there's my first star made. And what kind of material will I throw on this? I'll put that neon material on there for a starter. Okay, so I'm happy with this. What I'm going to do is just duplicate it and spin it around 45 degrees to make this smaller star inside it. So what I'm going to do is grab my rotate tool, and I want to rotate around this Z-axis here, the blue axis, and I'm going to hold down Command while I drew it, while I rotate it, and I'm also going to hold down Shift, because that will snap my rotation to 5-degree intervals, and so I can rotate around 45 degrees. So now I've got a second star sitting in the middle here. Now, because this is neon, in the real world, these two stars would be sitting one slightly in front of the other. They wouldn't actually be running through each other. So this second sweep here, I'm going to grab my Move tool and just pull it backwards so it's just sitting behind there. The other thing I'm going to do, if we look back at the original image, is that inner star is a little smaller. It's not quite half the size, but somewhere around there. So the second sweep, let's go to the star, and the outer radius, let's shrink that down to something kind of like that. So there's our star built, looking pretty good. Now the other thing we've got to do is, of course, is build the base of this star. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab both of these star shapes. I'm going to Command drag them out of this group, which will duplicate them, and I want to connect these together. So let's see if this will work. I don't actually know if this will work. Let's give it a try and see what happens. Let's go create generator connect and put the two stars that I've created into that connect. Whoop, drop them in the connect. There we go. And let's just grab that connect and just pull it backwards a little bit. And there's my star there. Now, I'm going to put that connect into an extrude and see what happens. Now, I might have a problem in the center. Let's see what happens. Create generator extrude. Put the connect in there. And nope, that's looking pretty good. That will be just fine for what I'm trying to achieve here. Now, one of those stars is sitting just behind the other, which is giving me the stepped extrude. So I can grab whichever one that is. It's the other one, I think, and just move it backwards and forwards. And again, I'm just doing this very roughly. And there's my extrude sitting in behind there. Now the other thing is, looking at my image, this base sits out just slightly larger than the neon of the star. If I have a look here, because of the way the sweep is working, my star actually extends quite a way out. So what I'm going to do is go into the stars inside the connect, which are creating the extrude, and I can change their outer radius and get those a little wider, and I'll maybe change the inner radius as well, just so that base is a little more solid behind there. So I've got an inner radius of 8 there, so let's change this other one as well. Let's make that 6, 7, 8. and make the outer radius a little larger until it goes just past the sort of the neon part. And let's grab that extrude and just bring it up fairly close in behind the star. So there's the star section made with its solid base, and let's put that orange color on the base, and let's name this star base sweep. This one is star 2, and this one is star 1. So there's all those elements together, and together they make up the star. So again, what I can do is shift select those 3 star elements, Option G to group them. This is the star, and I've got a sweep left over. Which one's that one? That is my base. Okay, so let's just name that base. And now my scene's looking super tidy. Let's grab the star, let's move it up and shift it across, and let's have a look at my image here. So yeah, the spike from the top of the star sticks out the top, the ones stick out the sides. So let's see if we can kind of eyeball those into place. Now my star is quite a little bit different than the other one, but that looks okay. I'm pretty happy with that. That's not bad. Now up to you, of course, where you want to position this. You might want to have yours all the way through. I kind of like that actually. That looks pretty good. Just bring it forwards just a little. And there's the star sitting in behind the welcome sign. Now the only other thing I haven't done is this, the sign itself is kind of grey, so let's have a look. It's basically a white colour, sort of yellowy white, and then red around the outside. So let's grab that sweep from the sign. Here it is here. Let's put the red colour on that sweep, and let's make a sort of a yellowy white colour for the base of the sign. So I'm going to command drag this orange shader, double click it, and in the colour, let's set this not to a full white, just sort of a slightly yellowy white. And let's call this sign, because it's going on the sign. And this will go on the original extrude here. So let's drag and drop that onto the extrude. That's looking a little too yellowy. Maybe I'll just double click that and make it a bit more white. Okay, so there's our sign made. A couple more things to do. Let's do a test render and see what it looks like. So I'm going to center this in my screen, hit Shift R, which will render to my picture viewer. And there's my sign. Obviously it's not exactly the same as that, but we're getting pretty close. And it would be easy to go through and start adjusting all the different elements and get them looking exactly the way that we want them to. There's no lighting in here currently. It looks pretty flat. So I'm going to do something super easy and just make a physical sky to create some lighting. So let's go to our Create menu, down to Physical Sky, and make a physical sky. If I hit Shift R again, straight away this is looking a lot better. We've got the physical sky, which gives us some fairly natural looking lighting across here. It gives us a horizon sort of gradient. And in my picture viewer here, I can select and just click on the 2 different versions of my render, and I can compare what's going on. We can see we've got shadows here now. The shading overall is much nicer. We've got shadows from the sign falling on the base. That's starting to look pretty good. Now, I kind of like the idea of seeing this in the evening. So one of the great things about physical sky is you can change the time of day that this lighting system works on. There's a clock here. You can click and drag on it. And if we start to click and drag this around, you'll actually see as I click and drag it, the sun is changing direction here, and the sky is starting to change direction and change color, and down somewhere around here I'm getting to, what is this, 7:30 coming to 8 o'clock, I'm getting into golden hour. So the physical sky really tries to emulate real world light, including things like golden hour, where we get that golden light as the light comes through the atmosphere and gets that sort of tint. I've hit Shift R there. Now I'm starting to get a real evening kind of look. Because I've got some luminance in this this neon shader, that's showing up quite brightly here. Nothing else is showing up as lit. Now, I quite like the time of day for this lighting, but at the moment the light I can tell is somewhere off to the left-hand side. What I want to do is grab my physical sky. I'm going to go into its coordinates. Now, Cinema 4D has this quirk where the rotation axes are also known as the HPB, or heading, pitch and bearing axes. If you jump into any object's coordinates, you can change the order back to XYZ, which makes a little more sense to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag on the Y-axis. That's the vertical rotation axis of my physical sky. And as I drag it around, we should see, there we go, the sun is actually moving around. And I can reposition where that evening sun is. And if I hit Shift R now I'm getting a nice evening sunlight starting to come across here and light this with this yellowy kind of golden hour light. And that's really starting to look pretty good. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things we can do. If we want to, we could get into our neon shader. We could actually add some glow to it if we want to. And if I just do a test render of that, we get a bit of glow. Personally, I don't really like using glow in Cinema 4D. It's slow to test because you have to test render your scene. And once it's there in your render, you can't change it. I prefer to do all my glows in After Effects in post-production. And in another tutorial, I'll show how to set up object buffers so that you can do glows really easily on specific objects in After Effects. So I'm going to turn this glow off, and I'm going to leave my, do another test render and leave my scene at that. I'm pretty happy with that. It looks pretty good. Oh, actually, one more thing I'll do. My light bulbs, which are not real light bulbs, obviously, they need to have a little bit of a glow or some sort of lighting to them. So I'm going to put that neon material onto my light bulbs, which are the ones in the cloner. So drag and drop onto the sphere, and now I should have some little bright bulbs around the edges as well. Not sure about that look. I might have to go back and change that, maybe make a new Fresnel shader that's a little whiter. But anyway, we're getting there. That's starting to look like something pretty decent.